And I've been asked to talk to Texas lawyers about what do you do and how do you protect yourself from accusations that are made by clients or perhaps non-clients when files are becoming more and more paperless. As we go into the paperless generation where files are stored electronically, where do you find the evidence to establish a point when a lawyer becomes the lawyer accused, either in a malpractice situation or in a grievance situation? Over the years, I've had occasion to represent lawyers in both instances. And what I found early on is that one of the most effective types of evidence to use in a case of that nature was that ubiquitous and very humble little pink slip. You know, the one that read, "While you were out," and on it was written the name of a person who had called and sometimes the nature of what they were calling you about. More often than not, it was a client. I was mentored early on in my career to, number one, return the call promptly, if at all possible, and number two, to document the fact that I had done just that. What I began to do as a practice was to simply save the pink slips and typically would jot on the bottom of it the date and time when the telephone call was returned, and usually something about what the nature of the conversation was. And then those pink slips were returned to the file where they were kept. Now that did two things. It usually upset secretaries and file clerks who had to keep up with the things, and very often it created a very bulky file because the pink slips would very often outnumber the correspondence or the pleadings or other types of documents that might be there. Nevertheless, what I found when I began to handle cases on behalf of lawyers, particularly in front of grievance committees, was that nothing was a more effective piece of evidence than that pink slip. And I would reproduce them, often in color, and send them to counsel for the state bar and produce them color copies for the members of the grievance committee. What that did in a very effective way was to usually establish 2 points. Number one, very often it would establish the fact that the client who had made the accusation that my lawyer simply won't return my phone calls or did not keep me informed, it began to demonstrate to the members of the grievance committee particularly that maybe that client was part of the problem themselves. Number two, it made a very effective proof that the lawyer had in fact returned the calls, and it began to raise questions perhaps in the grievance committee's minds about whether or not the client was being truthful. So what do we do now that those pink slips are going away in the paperless office? What do we do in this electronic age? Well, number one, I've found that I think we can use the computer itself as an effective means to do that. What phone calls tend to be replaced by now are the emails, and printing off those chains and keeping them in the file, I think is still an effective way to establish that communication has been made. I went a step further early in my career, and I think it was a helpful thing, and that was not just to document files and cases where you were dealing with a client, but also to keep those pink slips in situations where there was an inquiry. And so I established early on a miscellaneous file and kept them by years. A phone call would come in, I would return it. There was a discussion about whether or not I would be retained. Very often it would end up that I would not, but I wanted that documented, and those pink slips became an effective way of doing that. Through the years, there have been occasions where persons have made claims or tried to bring claims that a lawyer represented them or had accepted employment when he or she had not. And again, using those pink slips that were stored, even if there was no file opened on behalf of that person, was an effective way to establish that they had not. So as we go into the electronic age, how do we save those pink slips? I think you can still document your files. You could document them effectively. Whether or not those files will now be stored in those cardboard boxes in some dusty office somewhere, or whether or not they'll be stored in the cloud, I think the rule remains the same. If you get the phone call, return it. And when you return it, document it. I think it can save you time, effort, and grief in the future. Thank you.